There's a psychological law Jung discovered that sounds like mysticism, but is actually science. The moment you stop forcing life, life starts working for you. Not because of some cosmic reward system, but because worry and control are literally blocking your unconscious mind from doing what it does best, solving problems you don't even know how to articulate. Right now, while you're obsessing about that decision, that problem, that future outcome, your unconscious has already figured out the solution, but it can't deliver it because your conscious worry is creating too much psychological noise. I'm about to show you why Jung believed worry isn't just useless, it's actively sabotaging the natural intelligence that's trying to guide your life. And, more importantly, how to flip the switch from anxious forcing to what Jung called active surrender. This is the state where problems solve themselves, opportunities appear from nowhere, and life starts flowing in ways your worried mind could never orchestrate. This isn't about positive thinking or letting go. It's about understanding the profound psychological mechanics of why everything works better when you stop trying to make it work. Here's what nobody understands about worry. It's not about the future, it's about control. Specifically, your ego's desperate need to control what it was never designed to control. Jung discovered that worry is actually your ego trying to do the unconscious mind's job and failing miserably. Your conscious mind can hold maybe 7 pieces of information at once. Your unconscious is processing millions of data points, recognizing patterns your ego can't see, calculating probabilities you can't consciously comprehend. But when you worry, you're essentially telling your unconscious, "Stop, I'll take it from here." And then you proceed to loop through the same 3 anxiety-driven thoughts 500 times, calling it planning or being responsible. Meanwhile, your unconscious, which has access to the collective wisdom of humanity, which never sleeps, which sees connections your conscious mind can't imagine, is sitting there with solutions, waiting for you to shut up long enough to receive them. Think about every breakthrough you've ever had. Did it come while you were worrying, or did it come
to prevent the unconscious from reorganizing your life in ways the ego didn't plan? Think about what you worry about most. Is it really the practical outcome, or is it that the outcome might change you, might force you to grow, might reveal something about yourself you're not ready to see? That job interview you're obsessing about. You're not really worried about the job. You're worried about who you'd have to become if you got it. That relationship you're anxiously analyzing. You're not worried about losing them. You're worried about discovering who you are without them. That financial situation keeping you up at night. You're not worried about money. You're worried about what having or not having money means about your worth. Jung called this the ego's defense against individuation. Your conscious mind creates worry to avoid the transformation your unconscious is trying to create. It's psychological resistance disguised as responsible thinking. Here's a perfect example from Jung's cases. A woman came to him paralyzed by worry about her career. Should she stay in her secure job or pursue her passion? She spent months agonizing, making pro-con lists, seeking advice, worrying constantly. Jung helped her see that her worry wasn't about making the wrong choice. It was about avoiding making any choice, because choosing meant accepting responsibility for her life. It meant stopping the fantasy that someone else would save her. It meant becoming an adult in the deepest psychological sense. The moment she recognized worry as avoidance rather than preparation, everything shifted. She stopped trying to figure out the right choice and asked instead, "What is trying to emerge through me?" The answer came immediately, not from thinking, but from knowing. This is Jung's first principle.
Worry is the ego's way of avoiding what the unconscious already knows needs to happen. The more you worry, the more you're resisting your own growth. The anxiety isn't about the future. It's about avoiding the present transformation. When you understand this, worry loses its disguise. You see it for what it is, not responsibility but resistance, not planning but procrastination, not thinking but avoiding real thinking. And once
Stressed about making the wrong decision, your unconscious has already run millions of simulations and knows exactly what you need to do. But here's the problem. Worry creates so much psychological noise that you can't hear what your unconscious is telling you. It's like trying to hear a whisper while screaming. Jung discovered this through his own experience. During his most creative period, he stopped planning his writings. Instead, he would pose a question to his unconscious before sleep and wake with entire chapters fully formed. He didn't think them. They emerged from intelligence deeper than thinking. But this only worked when he stopped worrying about whether the ideas were good enough, whether colleagues would approve, whether the work would succeed. The moment he surrendered conscious control, his unconscious delivered insights that changed psychology forever. One of Jung's patients, an architect, couldn't solve a complex design problem despite weeks of worried analysis. Jung suggested an experiment. Stop thinking about it entirely for 3 days. No sketching, no planning, no conscious engagement whatsoever. The architect resisted. Surely abandoning the problem would make it worse, but he tried it. On day 3, he woke at 3 a.m. with the complete solution in his mind. Not just the structural problem, the entire design, more elegant than anything he could have consciously created. This is what your unconscious does naturally when you stop jamming its signal with worry. It solves problems in dimensions your conscious mind can't access. It sees patterns your ego can't recognize. It creates solutions your logical mind could never reach. But Jung discovered something even more remarkable. When you stop worrying, your unconscious doesn't just solve problems, it prevents them. It guides you away from disasters before they form, toward opportunities before they're obvious, into synchronicities that seem like magic, but are actually psychological precision. Which brings us to the phenomenon Jung was famous for identifying. Jung coined the term synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that seem orchestrated by something beyond chance. But here's what most relationships. You don't perceive people trying to connect. You only see potential rejection. When you're stressed about your future, you don't recognize doors opening. You only see uncertainty. But when worry stops, something miraculous happens. You randomly meet exactly who you need to meet. The perfect book accidentally falls into your hands. The solution coincidentally appears just when you need it. Jung documented hundreds of these synchronicities, and they all had one thing in common. They occurred when the person stopped forcing and started flowing, when conscious worry ceased and unconscious wisdom was allowed to operate. Here's a stunning example from Jung's own life. He was struggling with a theoretical problem about the nature of psychic energy. Despite months of worried analysis, he couldn't crack it. Finally, exhausted, he gave up trying. The next day, a patient he had never met before arrived and spontaneously described a dream that contained the exact symbolic solution to Jung's theoretical problem. The patient had no knowledge of Jung's work on this issue. It was pure coincidence, except Jung knew better. The synchronicity was always available, but it could only manifest when Jung stopped worrying long enough to receive it.
His unconscious had drawn this patient to him at exactly the right moment. But this orchestration only worked when conscious forcing stopped. This is the secret of synchronicity. It's not magic, it's psychological mechanics. Your unconscious is constantly arranging meaningful encounters, timely opportunities, perfect solutions. But worry makes you psychologically unavailable to receive them. One of Jung's patients documented this perfectly. She worried obsessively about finding her life purpose, spending years in anxious searching. Finally, exhausted, she gave up. Within a week, 3 separate coincidences led her directly to work that became her life's mission. The path was always there. Worry just made her blind to it. Here's Jung's deepest insight about worry. It's actually the shadow side of control. The parts of yourself that you've rejected, vulnerability, uncertainty, trust, get twisted into anxiety and obsessive thinking. Every worrier has the same shadow material. The terrified child who learned that controlling meant surviving. The vulnerable self who discovered that hypervigilance meant safe.
Trying to prevent being left again. But here's what's powerful. When you integrate these shadow aspects, worry naturally dissolves. Not through force or positive thinking, but through wholeness. When you reclaim your vulnerability, you don't need to worry about being hurt. You know you can handle it. When you integrate uncertainty, you don't need to control everything. You trust your ability to respond. When you accept your limitations, you stop worrying about being perfect. You're free to be real. Jung demonstrated this with a patient who worried obsessively about his health. Through shadow work, they discovered he'd completely rejected his own mortality, pushed death so far into his shadow that he lived in constant anxiety about dying. But when he began integrating this shadow material, not becoming morbid but accepting death as part of life, his health anxiety vanished. Not because he stopped caring about health, but because he stopped trying to control the uncontrollable. He integrated what he'd been fighting, and the fight ended. This is the profound truth about worry. It's not really about future problems. It's about past rejections. Every worry is a shadow aspect trying to protect you from experiencing again what you've rejected. But the protection becomes the prison. When you integrate your shadow, you don't become careless. You become carefree, not irresponsible, but unencumbered. Not reckless, but free. The energy you were using to worry transforms into presence, creativity, and authentic engagement with life. Jung's final insight is the most practical. There's a state beyond both worry and passivity. He called it active surrender. This is consciously cooperating with what's trying to emerge, rather than forcing what you think should happen. This isn't letting go and letting God. It's not passive acceptance. It's actively participating with the intelligence of your unconscious, consciously collaborating with forces greater than your ego's plans. Here's how it works. Instead of worrying about outcomes, you focus on alignment. Instead of forcing solutions, you create conditions for solutions to emerge. Instead of controlling the river, you become skilled at reading its currents. Jung practiced this himself. When facing major decisions, success felt empty. Jung taught him active surrender. Instead of worrying about every decision, he learned to feel for psychological resonance. Instead of forcing outcomes, he created space for them to emerge. Instead of controlling employees, he aligned them with the company's natural direction. The results were extraordinary. Not only did his company thrive beyond what worry had ever produced, but solutions to problems emerged before the problems fully formed. Opportunities appeared that no amount of strategic planning could have predicted. The right people showed up at the perfect moments. He described it like this: I stopped pushing the river and learned to read its current. Everything that used to require force now happens through flow. Problems I used to worry about solve themselves before I even fully understand them. This is active surrender. Not giving up, but giving over. Not abandoning responsibility, but exercising a higher form of it. You're still fully engaged, but from a completely different psychological position. You're working with life instead of against it. Let me connect all of this, because Jung's insight here is revolutionary and immediately applicable. Worry isn't preparedness, it's resistance to transformation. Your unconscious has infinitely more processing power than your conscious worrying mind. Synchronicities are always available, but worry makes you blind to them. Your need to control is shadow material that worry can never satisfy. Active surrender creates better outcomes than anxious forcing ever could. The moment you stop worrying, several things happen simultaneously. Your unconscious intelligence comes online, fully. Solutions you couldn't think your way to suddenly become obvious. Patterns you couldn't consciously see reveal themselves. The path forward clarifies, not through analysis, but through knowing. Synchronicities multiply exponentially. The right people appear. The needed resources manifest. The perfect timing emerges, not through magic, but through finally having the psychological availability to perceive what was always there. Your shadow material integrates naturally. The vulnerability you were protecting through worry becomes strength. The uncertainty happening rather than what you're afraid might happen. Able to access the vast intelligence of your unconscious rather than the limited loops of your anxious conscious mind. This doesn't mean becoming passive or careless. It means recognizing that worry is psychological noise, preventing you from accessing your real power. Your unconscious is infinitely more capable of navigating life than your worried conscious mind. But it can only do its job when you stop interfering. Try this experiment for just 1 week. Every time you catch yourself worrying, stop and say, "My unconscious is working on this." Then redirect your attention to what's in front of you right now. Don't try to stop thinking about the problem. That's just another form of control. Simply acknowledge that a part of you far more intelligent than your worry is handling it. Watch what happens. Solutions will emerge from nowhere. Synchronicities will multiply. Opportunities will appear that worry would have made you miss. Problems you've been forcing will resolve naturally, not through magic, but through finally accessing the psychological resources that worry was blocking. Jung discovered that life has an intelligence that transcends our conscious planning. When we stop worrying long enough to perceive it, we discover we're not alone in figuring everything out. We are supported by an unconscious intelligence that's been trying to help us all along. The question isn't whether to trust this intelligence, it's whether you're willing to stop worrying long enough to experience what happens when you do. Everything you're worried about right now, your unconscious has already solved. You just can't hear the solution over the noise of your worry. When the worry stops, the solutions speak. And that's when everything starts to work out. Not because you figured it out, but because you finally stopped preventing the intelligence that's always been there from doing what it does naturally. If you're ready to stop worrying and start accessing your unconscious intelligence, subscribe to this channel where I break down Jung's most practical techniques for everyday transformation. And watch the video on your screen now about active imagination. I'll show you exactly how to dialogue with your unconscious and access solutions beyond your conscious mind's capabilities. Remember, your unconscious has already figured out everything you're worried about.